Okay, everybody, I want to welcome you to the second installment of the Cultural Enrichment and Professional Development Training Series. My name is Kyle Lackey. I am Program Coordinator here in the Advanced Workforce Center, and it's an honor to be here with you all. And I am truly honored to introduce our facilitator, Myron Burr. So, Myron has joined the University of St. Louis University of Missouri St. Louis in the spring of 2022 and serves as the coordinator for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Now, prior to joining the ODEI staff, Myron worked at Lindenwood University as an instructional designer and chair of the DEI task force. While at Lindenwood, Myron was instrumental in developing and leading the university's first Day of Dialogue, an annual campus wide event where students, faculty, and staff take the opportunity to examine their individual and institutional role in building a shared community. He's passionate about dialogue and creating space for everyone to participate in the conversation around equity and inclusion. Myron is excited to continue the work and collaborate with others across campus to make UMSL a more equitable and inclusive place to live, learn, and work. So, Myron, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Kyle, for that introduction. It's always a bit humbling to have someone read back your biography for you. So I just want to first and foremost, excuse me here. Let me get my screen set up perfect way. Just want to first and foremost just say thank you to everybody for joining today. I know it's not easy to join after work, especially on a Thursday. Depending on where you're logging in from, it's 5:30. If you're on the East Coast, it's 6:30, so it's dinner time. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that has joined us today. It is greatly appreciated. Kyle will be sort of monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions throughout this process, drop them in the chat or the question and answer portion of this webinar as we kind of get forward. So like Kyle was saying, my name is Myron Burr. I'm excited to be here today to kind of walk through this inclusive workplace practices workshop with everyone. Kyle kind of mentioned this already, but I am currently the coordinator for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the University of Missouri St. Louis, and I'm excited to be a part of this workforce webinar series with the Advanced Workforce Center. So with all of the introductions and the pleasantries out of the way, let's kind of go ahead and jump into this. Okay, so today's agenda, first and foremost, I want to say if you have your cell phone handy and ready, go ahead and get it out. We're going to be doing some interactive experiences throughout this presentation today. You can also use your cell phone. I will drop a link into the chat for everybody to utilize here in a second as well. So just tonight's agenda, we're going to go through some introductions, get to know who's in the space with us today. And then we're going to do a quick workshop overview and purpose. It's more like workshop expectations before jumping into workplace foundations, defining DEI, talking a little bit about organizational equity. And then we're going to end with a capable connection. And then we're going to wrap and review. And then we're going to end with a little bit of a wrap. End with a wrap and review. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take your time with this. I will drop a link in the chat for everybody as well. There we go. And we will share a different screen. There we go. There we go. So if everybody can kind of take the time, break out your smartphone, put it up to the QR code. You can use the link that was dropped in the chat. You should be able to see all this, and I'll double check to make sure our technology is good to go as well. All right. So first question that we have today is, where are we coming from? The library. Okay, absolutely. E-learning. Thank you. Thank you. We'll give everybody about a minute or so. Elementary education. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Okay, okay. Healthcare. Got a lot of different backgrounds and Okay. A place of peace. I love that. I love that. I love that for you. Okay. Okay. Campus. All right. Okay, we're going to go to the next question here. One song to describe your current mood. I know we're all just getting off of work. We really just want to kind of release that tension, enter into the space. So let me see one song to describe your current mood. And I will go first. It won't show up here on the screen. I'll just say it. Dancing Queen. I like that one. Mine is Summer Renaissance by Beyonce. She's just been stuck in my head. I got the chance to see her when she came to St. Louis in August and just been running through that album nonstop ever since. All right, we got some more up there. I love it. I love it. No Stress Whiz Kid. Okay, okay, I like that. Wild Child. No worries. Okay, okay. We'll let a few more responses come in. All right, all right. Seeing no more responses, we'll go ahead and jump to our next question here. Why are you here today? What is it that you hope to learn? I know the title is Inclusive Workplace Practices, but what does that mean to you? How to be a more equitable supervisor. Thank you for sharing. Understand how to work through conflict with difficult coworkers, help my team be more inclusive. All of these are great. All of these are great. Hoping to learn ideas for inclusion that can implement right away. Okay. Gaps in knowledge and hear different perspectives. Better understand my problem solving. Okay. Increase knowledge around DEI. Love it, love it, love it. Keep the DEI knowledge flowing. Okay. All right, we're going to switch to the next question. So, how are we entering into the space today? We started with the song that describes your current mood, but if you can look at this feelings chart right here, where do we show up on this chart? So, I'm feeling joyful today, feeling very confident. I've got my tie on with the tie clip, got the all black going with the stripes. I'm feeling good, right? Leading us through this important conversation. So, how are we entering into the space today? Optimistic. I love it. Anxious. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Busy, hopeful, happy, tired. Wish I could move this one. I can't. I'm sorry. Hopeful. Overwhelmed. Thankful. Okay. Inquisitive. That's a nice word. I like that word, inquisitive. Give another couple seconds to get some responses coming in. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating in that word sharing. Inadequate. That was one that came through at the end. Content. Okay. I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating in that word sharing process, just to help us set our feet and kind of guide us in this conversation as we kind of continue to move forward, release some of that energy, some of those feelings into the space, welcome them in as we kind of begin this conversation. Okay, work shop expectations, right? So we want to focus on, be where your feet are as much as you can. Seek first to understand, not to be understood. Be your authentic self. And we've already started some of those things when we started with the word sharing process in the Mentimeter. Keep an open mind, right? You might hear something today that just sparks your interest just a little bit more. Um, the first three, we're here to dialogue, not debate. Unfortunately for you, I have the mic today, so I will be dominating this conversation, but that's okay. You'll have ample opportunity to chime in via the chat or the question and answer session of this live feed here as well. So I appreciate everyone for taking the time to answer those questions. We're going to jump right into workplace foundations and the point in the of what we're here for today. So first and foremost, before we begin to talk about inclusive workplace practices, we have to understand the foundations of the workplace that we're currently entering into. So right now in the United States, our landscape is changing, and it is changing rapidly. And that rapid change requires us to understand historical patterns, present realities, and to plan for the future. So, what does this mean for our workplace and inclusive practices? Well, currently, we are in the midst of a demographic boom. There is more diversity present in the United States than ever before, and there are new minorities that are leading the way there. And there's an influx of new minorities. And when I say new minorities, I'm referring to Hispanic and Latinx immigrants, our Asian immigrants, and individuals that are identifying as multiracial. They have contributed to more than 3/4 of the nation's population's growth from 1960 to 2008. That is an influx of new minorities, right? So we are no longer a predominantly black and white country. But how do we leverage this diversity explosion for the common good? It requires us to ask new questions and re-examine old conclusions. So I've got a graphic here on the screen right now that just shows the shift of that, the projections. It comes from a 2019 National Skills Coalition report. They looked at the United States Census information from 2018 and used it to project numbers for 2040 and 2050. In the next 7 years, by 2030, the US is projected to have a non-white majority workforce. And what that means, it doesn't necessarily mean that our white population will no longer be the majority inside of the United States. It's just taken as a whole. They won't be the dominating majority in the workforce, right? 60% white majority in 2018 will decrease by 15%, by nearly 15% in 2050. So you go from 60% to right around that 45, 46%. The racial projections of the American workforce actually loom well for our American economy. The National Skills Coalition's report indicates that more than 25% of the growth in production between 1960 and 2008 was associated with increasing racial and gender diversity that was present and found in the workforce. Racial workforce diversity is one of the most important predictors of sales revenue, customer numbers, and profitability. And companies that are led by racially diverse teams are more likely to experience above average financial performance. Essentially, what it boils down to is that increasing diversity makes groups more knowledgeable, sensitive, efficient, creative, and successful, and afford groups rich opportunities to respond more effectively to the challenges of society. But with that comes a generational and cultural divide. The white population is aging and they're not having babies at the same rate as other races and ethnicities. The baby boomers are moving away from the workforce in large droves, right? So, what we'll see is an influx of younger minorities entering into the workforce and an exodus of our older white population. But the ones that are still there right now, it creates a generational and cultural divide. So, what does that mean for the future of our workplace, right? So we have to understand where we've been to understand where we're going. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 primarily focused on prohibiting discrimination based upon race, sex, color, religion, and national origin. There were five protected classes. Since 1964, we've expanded that to include age and ability status as well. So the 1964 civil rights movement and the legislations and the laws and regulations that were passed during that time helped to shift the sensibilities around discrimination. But as we continue to ask new questions and re-examine old conclusions, we see more demographic markers that are rapidly moving into the workplace. We need to be able to confront these in an equitable and inclusive manner. So, although the numbers are improving and we see more racial diversity present, we're still divided along familiar lines of race, class, and gender. There's also an increased intersectionality as more people move across national and cultural borders and other demographic markers become more mainstream. What I mean by other demographic markers: gender, sexuality, faith. As we limit or as we see a downturn in immigration from European countries and more from Hispanic and African or Hispanic and Latinx countries and African countries, that shapes what we think about national origin. It shapes what we think about race. It shapes what we think about ethnicity. It shapes what we think about gender, about our sexuality, right? These are conversations that we're having now and that we're going to need to continue to have. We need to be hip to the current trends. So, how do we do that, Myron? That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked. First and foremost, we have to prepare our current and our new generations, right? So, our nation's success depends on our youth. They'll need formal schooling, they'll need other training consistent with the long term needs of our country, especially as we ask them to enter into the workforce. And it starts with them at the K-12 level and making sure that we have that we have adequate resources for every child in every school district across the nation, because that's what will be needed for our workforce. Then we need to look at narrowing the generational and cultural gap. So as our older generations continue to matriculate through the workforce and just through the nation in general, we have to find a way to build intimate connection with our younger generations. So the baby boomers, folks born in the 60s, the United States looks drastically different from them for what it did for most of their life, right? They were born into a world or into a nation where it was largely black and white. In 1960, the black population of the country was right around 14% of the US population, and the white population hovered around 86, 87, 88. And then we had a few other minorities that kind of rounded us out to get to that 100% mark. And my math might be wrong there, so I apologize. Though I'm not a math major for a reason. But as of 2030, people of color will make up 40% of our nation's demographic. So we'll have to find a way to connect for the benefit of the future. We need to take care of the younger generations. We need to figure out a way to bridge that cultural gap that we're seeing. And then lastly, we have to create new destinations in workplaces. So we understand that we have an influx of new minorities that are entering into our nation and entering into our workplaces. And so what does it mean to create new destinations in workplaces? It means that we have to be focused on providing our new immigrants our new minorities with those things that they need. Don't need integration into the community. We don't want our communities to be left behind. So we need to integrate them into the community in thoughtful ways, right? Catering to the demographic trends with proper schooling, proper social service, employment opportunities, employment assistance, and civic engagement. What does that look like? Those are heavy words. So what does that look like? English language training, providing high and low skill job opportunities and training, partnerships with our local communities and our local community organizations that are already doing the work. So that sets the stage for the future of the workplace, kind of how we can navigate towards that. I hope you still have your phones out because we're going to go right back to that mentee. Even though we understand what the future of the workplace is coming to, we also need to understand truthfully what do we mean by such words as diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So we're going to go back to that mentee. Hopefully you've got your QR code still up. You can hit that. I want to share this tab. We're going to switch here. So before we kind of go any further, let's set the stage for what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean for us in your own words. So diversity is dot, dot, dot. Difference. Creative brain trust. Incorporating various perspectives from different cultures. Variety. Beautiful. Diversity is beautiful. A wide range of abilities, ethnicities, cultures, and genders. It's a pretty good definition. I don't know who wrote that, but that's a pretty good definition. The parts of identity being that differentiate and join together across our communities. Man, y'all should be leading this workshop. Those are some good answers. Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're going to go to our next question. So much more than how one can define. Okay, like that. Right there in the 11th hour. Next question. Equity is dot, dot, dot. Equity is treating everyone equally, ensuring that all community members have what they need to thrive. The golden rule. I like that. Okay. Giving your diverse range of people what they need, acknowledging injustice and acting accordingly. Okay, okay. Any more responses coming? Okay. Those are also great definitions. Treating them equal in rights and opportunities. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Our next question is inclusion. Help me define inclusion. Inclusion is okay. A little quiet here for inclusion. Equal access to resources and opportunities. Not inviting one to the table, but ensuring that not only inviting one to the table, but ensuring they have a voice. Everyone's involved. Ensuring that people feel represented and heard, feeling a valued part of a collective whole. Okay. Equitable seat at the table for any who seeks it without extra barriers. I love that one. I love that. I love that. Okay. So, as we can see, the words diversity, equity, and inclusion have come to mean many different things to many different people. Uh, so, we're going to take the next hour or so to unpack what diversity, equity, and inclusion really means, how we can build organizational equity from those definitions, and then look at ways that we can create inclusive workplace practices. So a lot of the definitions that we saw were spot on. Diversity, categorical representation of difference across a multitude of factors. And there's two ways that we primarily look at diversity, especially when we talk about workplace diversity. It's cognitive diversity and identity diversity, right? So cognitive diversity is the way that we think and how we make sense of the world around us. And those identity diversity are our social categories, how we identify ourselves, how we identify the others around us. These social categories help us create context for the diversity present in the workplace. And we'll talk briefly about how cognitive and identity diversity work together to produce what Scott Page refers to as a diversity bonus, but we'll get there. Next up, equity, right? So I saw a lot of equity is equality, equity is purposeful support, but I like to think of equity as ownership. Point blank, period, full stop. Equity is ownership. So let's think of equity as stock in a company. If you own stock in a particular company, you own a share of ownership in that particular company. And for whatever reason, you've decided that it would be a good investment for you to buy stock, buy shares of that company, to buy ownership of that company. And there's a lot of different companies to buy into, but you made the choice to buy into this particular one. The same way we choose to be a part of a particular workplace or organization. You are invested. Now that you have stock in this company, that you have share of this ownership, you are invested in their outcomes, right? You want to increase your investment. You want to maximize your investment. So you want to make sure that this company has positive outcomes. Equity as ownership is important because ownership brings with it certain rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Owners belong, right? Owners have a say in how the company is run through stockholder and shareholder meetings. Owners have a voice. They're part of having equity in a company means that you receive dividends. You receive a share of the profits. And profit shares look different for different levels of ownership based upon how many shares of the company stock that you own at any given time, right? Well, equity looks different for different groups of people within the workplace. Profits, in this sense, relates to the purposeful support given to individuals in the ways that they require it. Equity calls for an ownership of our experiences so that detailed and precise support may be given to those members of an organization who need it the most, when they need it the most, how they need it the most, and where they need it the most. There's an intentionality to equity that is specific to each individual or group within an organization. What is specific to one may not necessarily be specific to another based upon individual investment levels, right? And a couple last things I'll say about equity. Providing folks with support without their input is not equity. Providing support without input is charity. And if you're struggling with diversity in your workplace or struggling to figure out how to manage your diversity in your workplace, there's a high chance that you're also struggling with managing for equity as well too. Struggling with management equity. So equity is an investment into the well-being of your workplace, both from an organizational and individual perspective. So inclusion is next up on the list. Inclusion, shareholder meetings, right? It's the ongoing process of sharing power and making decisions. I myself got a few stocks of a few companies, and every time that the company is getting ready to make a prime decision, they send out a prospectus. Now, I might not read all the prospectus, but I've got the information there for me. It's available. I understand what's going on. I'm involved in the decision making process. And every now and then, some companies will have a vote about which way to go with their stock or for their shareholders. And occasionally, I might chime in and give my one vote and say, hey, yeah, I think the company should go this way. I think the company should go this way. That's part of the inclusion, right? I'm involved in the shareholder process, in the power sharing process, because I have equity in the company. I'm an owner, right? I'm invested. So that's what inclusion is: shareholder meetings, the ongoing process of power sharing and making a decision. It's also the ongoing process of managing and valuing diversity within our workplaces, both cognitively and through identity diversity. A diversity bonus is produced when we get this process right. Inclusion is monitoring the stock market of our workplaces, right? There might be fluctuations that occur. The stock might go up, might go down, depending on what happens in the environment around us. But we need to make sure that we're trending up and we're not trending down. Because if the stock falls too much, then we go bankrupt. There's no workplace, there's no company, there's no organization there for us. So equity and inclusion, those two are typically linked together. Inclusion is concerned with the intentional ways and methods traditionally underrepresented members of an organization are brought into that power sharing process. Equity is the intentional ways, right? Inclusion is attentive to the culture and the climate of an organization. Inclusion's primary objective is to create a sense of belonging for all members of an organization that transforms the environment into one where all members can fully and freely participate. It's part of the rights and privileges of being an owner. You have full permission to participate freely and openly. Inclusion is maximizing our investment, right? So that leads us into our next topic, which Scott Page will talk about our diversity bonus. So our workplaces are complex organizations that must respond to an assortment of multifaceted issues within their dynamic internal and external environments. The diversity found amongst the people is the key to enriching and powerful responses, asking new questions, re-examining old conclusions. Organizations that possess people with diverse cognitive repertoires respond better to complex tasks. And said another way, the connection between our cognitive diversity, the way that we think, the way that we process, the way that we understand information in the world around us, and our identity diversity produces a bonus for our workplace. A higher level of identity diversity increases the diversity of the cognitive repertoires that we can call upon for response. Diversity bonus is not just produced because we have a plethora of diverse individuals. No, the diversity bonus is produced when we utilize multiple perspectives to create a response that's more knowledgeable, sensitive, efficient, creative, and successful. And we're going to let Scott Page, let me see here, make sure you guys can hear us. We're going to make sure that Scott Page, okay, perfect.
Cognitive diversity consists of things like information, knowledge, heuristics, rules of thumb, causal models, right? Frameworks. Identity diversity consists of things like race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, physical abilities, those sorts of things. And so when you think about how does identity diversity improve outcomes, it's through cognitive diversity. If I'm a 65-year-old white engineer and you're a 33-year-old African-American computer scientist, right? Our training differences will matter, but so will the fact that we've filtered our lives through our identities. It's just going to change how we see things. So let's suppose we have a group of people sitting around a table and they're trying to come up with a creative solution to some problem. Well, if you think of 10 and I think of 10, but they're the same 10, then the 2 is no better than 1. But if I only think of 8 and you think of 10, but my 8 are different than your 10, there's a bonus there, right? Because we're getting sort of my extra ideas. Where the second level bonus comes in is sometimes we can take your idea plus my idea and we can combine them, right? And create something new. So the idea is to shift people's frame of reference, to move away from who's the smartest person, and instead think, who are the people who have germane knowledge and then that might be able to add to our solution here. Some of the places that
So Scott Page just walked us through how diversity is a bonus for us. We have a theoretical understanding of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've been able to define it, but that still doesn't explain how diversity, equity, and inclusion shows up in our workplaces. That's where we come to lean on organizational equity, right? So it's great to know definitions in theory, but how does that show up in the workplace? We have to move from the theoretical to the practical to the application process. In order to do that, we need to have a common ground. So we started the presentation with asking, where are we coming from? What industries? And we had a plethora of different industries that we were coming from to join us today. So all of our workplaces look different, but looking at them through the lens of an organization allows us to name core elements across industry. So these are the 5 core elements that you will see across every industry and will help us in understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion in the practical sense, right? Ideally, I would be able to use a circle to say all of these go round and round and round and round, but the arrow to the right of that also does the trick. You understand. So environment, strategies and goals, our work and technology, our formal and informal structures, and people. They all impact each other in various ways, and it's a continuous process, right? So our environment affects the strategies and goals, which affects work and technology, which affects our structures, which affects our people. And we can go back up the chain of command too. People, they impact your structures, which impact the work and technology that you can do, strategies and goals in your environment, and your environment affects or impacts the people. So let's dive into this a little bit more. So environments have founded, shaped, molded, and guided our workplaces for centuries. An environment comprises the surroundings or conditions in which an organization interacts with to survive and accomplish its goals. You have to be responsive to your environment in order to thrive, right? One of the biggest environmental factors is location. The location of an organization economically, geographically, politically impacts the availability of resources such as labor force, land space, and funding. If we use UMSL as an example right now, our environment, we are a part of the University of Missouri system. What that means is that there's 4 universities in the state of Missouri that are linked together, right? So our first and primary responsibility is to those students and those people in the state of Missouri. But we're the University of Missouri St. Louis. So our secondary responsibility is the people in St. Louis. The University of Missouri Kansas City, they're responsible for the Kansas City region. You've got Missouri S&T, who's responsible for Rolla. Then you've got our flagship institution down in Columbia that's responsible for a little bit more and inclusive and expansive that way. Right. So then we look at our strategies and goals. So this element focuses on the goals of an organization, intends to accomplish, and how an organization plans to achieve their goals. The strategy, the strategic plan. So our organizational leaders are charged with developing the strategy for achieving said goals. Leaders determine how and where organizations operate, the services provided, and who will provide these services, right? Most organizations list their stated goals and their strategies in their mission and vision statements, as well as their strategic plans. These typically offer the first attempt at outlining how an organization will deal with equity and inclusion, the owners in the process for managing for dividends. When I mean this, I'm going to take a 1990s clothing apparel store and use this as an example. So the environment that this 1990s clothing and accessories store was born into was at a time where you had your big box company like Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren dictating what it meant for streetwear, right? So this company comes in and says, Damon John founded his company. It's FUBU, right? He says FUBU means for us, by us. The environment is important to understand that you had these big box companies coming in and saying, this is what is culturally appropriate for African Americans. This is how we're going to decide that. Damon John came in and said, I'm going to respond to the environment and say, no, 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 no. This is for us, by us. You got your mission and your vision right there, laid out. Indicates how you move in your work and in your technology. So work is really just the day-to-day operations of how you get things done. And your technologies are the tools that you use to do that. Then we'll move into structures. So our structure systemizes the flow of work and power in an organization. We're thinking organizational charts, reporting lines, job descriptions, duties, and other rules and regulations really comprise our formal structures. Our informal structures refer to the culture and climate of an organization, the internal friendship groups that that arise, the external social networks, the unofficial power structures, knowing who to go to when you need things done, regardless of their title, right? These informal structures play a role in the success of formal structures and are often more critical to the work in progress of an organization. Formal and informal structures, really encompass the socialization of employees. The employees learn the do's and don'ts of an institution from the formal and informal structures that exist. This is how we operate. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. And then lastly, an organization cannot exist without people, which make people the most important part of any element of an organization. Problems arise when determining which people are part of an organization, how they're a part of an organization, and why they choose to continue to be a part of your organization. Workplaces are comprised of many different people with differing identities and motivations. Each group of people can reasonably claim a significant influence on an organization, right? The relationship of the people within the organization falls under the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is why I'm here speaking to you today, the coordinator of DEI initiatives. Diversity reflects the multiplicity of people and the range of their identities, whether that be age, gender, race, student, faculty, staff, etc. And then equity focuses on understanding why people choose to be involved, why are they invested in our organizations, and creating systems to keep them invested in our organization. And then inclusion deals with determining who is involved, how they're involved, and the ways, means, and methods of keeping them involved. So that's the theoretical aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is the practical aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and organizational equity, how we build that framework. But how do we apply this to inclusive workplace practices? Let me find my clicker here. There's a capable connection that's required for that application. And you're probably wondering, what in the world is capable? What does that mean? So capable, I founded the Capable Diversity Model, which is just a different approach to looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the Capable Diversity Model is a play on the word capable, which means able to efficiently and effectively achieve whatever one has set out to do. Competent. So the capable diversity method, the capable connection is increasing your DEI competency so that you're able to achieve efficiently whatever you set out to do in terms of inclusive workplace practices, right? So this is an achievable and efficient model that we can put in place. And I want to focus on the last four letters of capable. The first word in that definition, able, adapt, build, listen, and engage. And we're going to take the next 15 or 20 minutes or so to kind of walk through those and see how we can apply those to our organizational elements through a DEI framework and lens. Okay, we're good. So adapt, simply a change in behavior. Organizations have to respond to their environment and their present realities, right? So as we think about adaptation and change in our behavior, we're living through a global pandemic right now. When that hit in March 2020, nobody had any inkling of an idea that we were going to have to switch and change our behavior from being a very socially connected society to one that has to do things via screen like we're doing today. And that's okay. As we think about a change in behavior, let's go back even further pre-pandemic and think about the typewriter, right? The typewriter, you just have to sit down and hit everything. You couldn't make a mistake. And if you did, you had to swing it back and there's a big blot on your paper. Now we have computers. It's easier to type. We have to adjust and adapt to the times at hand, right? We have to adapt. There has to be a change in our behavior, adapt to our environments, respond to our environments in order to survive. Those are all fancy words, right? Very high cloud, 1,000-foot view. How do we bring that down to the organizational level to where it's really impactful for us on a day-to-day basis? It starts with managing for diversity. It starts with valuing diversity as well, right? So managing diversity, really changing the facets of an organizational structure, policies, procedures, and practices. These are the organizational elements that focus on strategies and goals, our working technologies, and our formal and informal structures. So what does that think? So what does that mean? So we talk about policies and procedures. We want to be an inclusive workplace. So that means putting into place uh, rules and regulations that stipulate what happens when you run afoul of the culture that we're building or the culture that we want to be, right? It means affirmative action in recruitment and promotion, employee resource groups, and other advisory support groups, a benefits package geared towards diverse groups. What does that mean? Well, let's think about daycare. Let's think about flex time. Let's think about remote options. Let's look at our healthcare benefits. Does it include benefits for birth control? Does it include benefits for individuals who are trying to get pregnant via insemination, right? Does it include English language learning for individuals who English might be a second language for them? Let's look at our different benefits packages and how that relates. It's representation on key internal committees, managing for diversity, right? It's the targeted career development programs for underrepresented populations inside of our organizations and our workplaces. It's giving presence to underrepresented populations through mentorship opportunities, professional support, professional development opportunities. It's promoting DE&I by engaging underrepresented populations in the decision-making processes. How do we allow others who may not sit in the C-suite, who may not be at the top of the organization chart, to gain that leadership experience, to gain that experience of leading a presentation, of leading an organization, of supervising different employees and individuals, right? It's transforming the institutional culture through incorporating DE&I to everything, into the very fabric of everything that we do inside and out of our organization. That's how we manage for diversity. Valuing for diversity in leadership practices, right? Changing attitudes and behaviors by improving relationships through diversity training programs. All of you are here today. You you are valuing diversity. You are signaling the importance of diversity, not only to me, but to everybody else on the call and to those in your company, right? Determining the things you value and also what makes you valuable. This focuses on the organizational elements of people. We're talking about sensibilities. We're changing people's minds. We're reaching their hearts, right? It's articulated endorsement of DEI in our mission and vision statement. Point blank, period. Here's who we are. Here's what we believe, and here's how we're going to operate. UMSL's mission statement is we transform lives. And then there's a clearly listed value statement: integrity, trust, access. Everything about diversity, equity, and inclusion is listed in our mission statement. We believe that education should be for everyone, right? And we mean everyone. And then that sets us up for our strategies and goals. How do we articulate that in the everyday aspect of what we do? Increase awareness, importance of cultural diversity around the office, right? Relevant information to understanding DE&I, relevant information culturally, economically, historically, socially. Valuing diversity is transitional in practice. You're really preparing the workplace to address DEI and change and cultural change. You're enhancing the readiness to transform culture through sponsorship and professional development opportunities for underrepresented populations. You're partnering with organizations in the community that are doing the things that you want to do and that you may not be able to do at a high level. You're enhancing, well, I said that one. And then you're transitioning the culture towards critical awareness. You're aware of DEI through educational programming and initiatives. That leads us to build. So build has double meaning. As a noun, it's your character, it's your form, it's your identity. As a verb, though, it means to assemble or construct action. You're doing something, right? So as we think about this in inclusive workplace practices, before we build, we first have to know what we're building. What is our makeup? What is our blueprint? Focuses on the organizational elements of the strategies and goals, your mission and vision, your work and technology, your structures, and your people. We come to understand our character, our form, our identity on four levels, right? Relation or individually, relationally, collectively, and materialistically. So on the individual level, we have self-definitions of goals, values, beliefs, and other individually held self-evaluations and expected futures. This is who I am, right? You answer that individual question by first saying, I am. This is who I want to be. And then relationally, we have roles that establishes us in relationship with and to others in the interpersonal space created by social interactions. So I'll use UMSL as an example. UMSL is a university. We know who we are as a university. Relationally, though, we want to be a university for teaching, research, and service. That's who we are to the community. Now, the community also has a chance to define UMSL relationally in the ways that they choose to interact with us. That's the social interaction piece, right? As we talk about it on a personal level, right now, I can describe myself in many different ways. But relationally, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a son. And those relationships look different with different people. I've got a brother and a sister. I'm a brother to my brother and a brother to my sister, and those relationships are different because we interact with each other differently, right? And then collectively, identification with the groups and social categories to which we belong, a sense of self within or outside social categories. I'm a strong, independent, Black educated male. That's a group, a Black educated male. There's a group, there's a collection that goes with that means something, right? I'm also part of a university system. What does it mean to be part of that system? Well, first and foremost, it means that we have to respond to the rules and regulations set forth by the board of curators who are appointed by the governor, right? And then we kind of go from there. And then materially, social entities beyond the self. So consisting of geographic places, material artifacts of modern life, the signs and symbols of you are who you say you are, right? I'm from the Midwest. I've got a Midwest twang and a Midwest sensibility about me. But if I want to say I'm inclusive and equitable, you should be able to see that. That should show up in our workplaces and everything that we do, right? Which leads us to listening. So listening at its core is really sustained communication. And there is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is an auditory and physical response to sound. It just happens naturally. Our ears are trained to respond to auditory stimulation. Physiologically, our ears react, receive, and process sounds. Hearing is a passive perception, right? There's no effort required to it. If a tree falls in the forest, do you hear it? Yeah, you do, but that's about it because it made a sound. Barring a soundproofing, barring some soundproofing device, we can't control what we hear. It's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise out there, right? It's an involuntary response. It's often used interchangeably with listening, but it's very, 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 very different from listening. So listening, or the word just listen, is a complete imperative sentence. Listen, period. It's a verb, right? It gives instruction, it makes a request, it issues a command. Listening is the intentional interpretation of that sound. It commands active participation, requires effort, demands our attention as we make sense of the sounds that we are hearing. Listening moves beyond the physical response of hearing and elicits a mental response. It elicits a mental response, an emotional response. It happens on two levels, active and passive. So passive listening, I was accused of this a lot as a child. It's in one ear, it's out the other. That's the hearing. We're distracted. We're not actually engaged in the process with each other. Active listening, on the other hand, requires curiosity, motivation, purpose, effort. It involves our mental processes and our functions to emotionally connect to the things that we are hearing. We listen for a deeper understanding of the sounds around us, of the noise around us. It's understanding and connection to help us fully participate in a dialogic process, right? It's engagement. And there's tools. Listening just doesn't happen by happenstance. Listening really is the bedrock of inclusive workplace practices. So how do we move from active listening to critical listening, which is where we really want to be? So critical listening brings every organizational element, environment, strategy, goals, work technology, structures, people into the listening process. It can determine if your institution is ready for transition or transformation. Critical listening is focused on the internal and the external environment. It routinely questions the institutional strategy and goals, the work and technology, and the structures. Critical listening is alert and it's aware of the formal and informal structures present at the institution, as well as what's going on around its environment. It has an honest curiosity about the people included within the boundaries of our organization, right? The foundation for critical listening includes inclusivity, learning, trust, experience, detachment, and delivery. And we'll take a closer look at those right now. Inclusivity. So, like listen, inclusion is an action word. Critical listening transitions inclusion to a state of belonging, welcoming, acceptance, and comfort. Listening inclusively requires a genuine commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Inclusive listening calls for humble awareness of our own capabilities, blind spots, and works hard to create the space for others to add to the dialogue process. Inclusive listening empathizes. It happens without judgment and is attentive to all the perspectives that are present in that dialogue process with us, right? Listening inclusively encourage effective collaboration through cultural intelligence and an honest curiosity about others. Critical listening involves learning. Our listening suffers due to an unconscious filtering of information we don't expect to hear or information we don't want to hear. We also reside in a society where we have an information overload, right? So we lose focus when we're bombarded with too much information. So critical listening works through information overload and focuses on the quality of the information presented. Critical listening observes what is being said and what is not being said, both equally. Critical listening turns information and knowledge into understanding by asking relevant questions, checking all of our assumptions and conclusions, and looking for gaps and discrepancies in what is being said, written, or maybe it's nonverbal, right? Understanding what is going on in our environment. In 2020, we had the summer of George Floyd and a racial awakening across the United States. What are we learning from that? How are we listening critically to what's being said, what's being unsaid? How are we filtering through the noise, right? How are we turning our information and how are we being skeptical of information that does not make sense? Critical listening filters out relevant information and tries to understand the information as it is being presented to us. It's going deeper, right? Most importantly, critical listening requires trust in this dialogue process. Trust in critical listening is not about validation, nor is it about agreement. Trust calls for mutual respect, authentic engagement, and understanding through inquiry. Trust acknowledges conflict and dissent as necessary parts of the dialogue process, but also as harbingers of effective communication. Trust brings shared meaning into the dialogue process. We may not be seeing eye to eye right now, but I trust that you have my best intentions at heart, and you have to trust that I have your best intentions at heart. We are in this together. We're invested in this process together. We want to maximize our investment. And you have to trust that I'm doing everything possible to maximize that investment. Which brings us to experience. So, experience is our greatest teacher, but it can also be our biggest distractor from listening, right? So practicing critical listening skills makes it easier to use our critical listening skills in the future. So what do I mean by experience can be our greatest teacher, but also can be our biggest enemy? Experience provides context and potential solutions, as well as potential challenges or obstacles. An over-reliance on past experiences, this is the way we've always done it, may interrupt the current critical listening process, right? So each dialogue is different. Each process is different. Critical listening requires us to forge a balance of knowing when and how past experiences apply to current situations and when we need to come up with new experiences, right? Delivery is next up on the list. This is one that, oh, I'm sorry, detachment was next on the list, but we're going to talk about delivery because it's on my brain right now. Delivery is next up on the list in the dialogic process. Underscores intention, it underscores impact, it underscores the way in which we deliver certain messages. Critical listening borrows from the old saying, say what you mean and mean what you say, so that we can ensure open and honest communication. Delivery is also about tone, right? Oftentimes we hear companies misstep and be accused of being tone deaf, right? Sometimes it's not in what you say, but it's how you say it. And the last one on the list is the attachment. So critical listening is a personal activity. However, we have to check our personal assumptions, our biases, and our feelings at the door because they can affect critical listening by clouding how we interpret and process information and learn from each other in our experience, right? Detachment acknowledges personal bias in an attempt to clarify, accept, and understand different viewpoints. This work of building inclusive workplace practices is very personal, but there are times where we have to detach from the process and not take it personally. Now, I'm not saying that you can't bring your whole entire self into this work, but you have to understand that there's a bigger purpose here, right? We're maximizing our investments, and that might require us to take a step back and say, hey, what you've said has hurt me or what you've done has hurt me. And I'm going to let you know that it's hurt me, right? Because I trust that you're going to hear what I'm saying and move forward better, but I'm not going to let it hinder us in moving forward, right? Which brings us to our last slide of the day, which is engage, which is putting our action into motion. We have to turn our knowledge into action. We have to put our theory into practice. Really, the engagement piece is about engagement means, it's arrangement to do something. No longer can we afford to sit on the sidelines and not think about inclusive workplace practices. Our workplaces are becoming more and more and more diverse. We have to do something. How is engagement demonstrated? It's demonstrated how we think, how we feel, how we act. It's really a marriage of our heads, of our hearts, and our hands. How we're going to move forward, how we're going to take the next step. And I like to use the word capable because we're capable of creating inclusive workplaces, right? We're capable of achieving efficiently and effective workplaces, whatever we set out to do. We're capable of that. We can increase our competency, right? It's how we adapt and respond to our environments, the intentional ways and methods we both manage and value diversity. It's understanding who we are and connecting our guiding principles and values to our strategies and our goals. It's constructing structures that aid in the dialogue process and create trust through that process. It's placing a high emphasis on being people centered, understanding that people are our most important component of any organization that we work in and walk through, and moving through that in a genuine and compassionate way, right? So hopefully you spent this past hour with me, hour and some change with me, and you feel like you have increased competency. You're able to effectively and efficiently set out and achieve efficient workplace practices. I know this is probably not the talk that you were thinking about. We looked at workplace practices in a different approach. All of our workplaces are different. So the way that we engage in our communities are going to be different. I just provided you with some tools, just a brief understanding of how that works. I know we were scheduled to go to 7, so I'm going to give you back about 20 minutes of your day here. But I just want to thank everybody for your participation tonight. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're right here with me, right? That doesn't go. I don't take that for granted. I don't take that lightly. So thank you for that. And I know you probably have more questions than anything right now. So here's how you can connect with me. You can connect with me via email, mburr@umsl.edu. You can find me on LinkedIn. Let's connect. You can also follow me on Instagram. I got to get my followers up, really, @BursoCode. Connect with me on there. But I also want to take a chance to plug our next workshop webinar series, which is collaboration and resilience in the workplace. Um, Kyle just dropped a link in the chat. The link that Kyle dropped in the chat is really for our survey. So if you still have your phones present, take out your phone, scan the QR code. You can use the chat right there. The feedback form is really critical for me. Let me know how I do as a presenter. It's really critical for our Advanced Workforce Center so they can understand the ways that we can better serve our community. You know, service is a part of what UMSL sets out to do, right? Teaching, research, and service. So help us in that in that endeavor, and that will be greatly appreciated. Um, I guess we got about 15 minutes left here. So I will open up the floor. If you have any, I'm going to stick around for about the next 5 minutes or so. If you have any questions or any concerns or anything that I can help you with, please feel free to utilize the chat or the question and answer section of the webinar, and we can jump into that. And if you don't have any questions for me, that is perfectly okay. We can also connect offline. But I just want to thank everybody for joining the live stream today.
Wow, that was that was impactful. I just wanted to share a little bit of my, some of the insights that hit me is you said something that said, before we can build, we have to know what we're building. That's impactful. I think that's huge. Have you ever been in a place where people say they want to do things but don't necessarily know how to do it, right? And I think that before we can truly build inclusive spaces, we have to know who we are, right? Because if we are showing up in places and we have a veil over our eyes of how things are supposed to operate, we're never going to get that diversity bonus. We could have a diverse group of individuals at the table, but still be an echo chamber, right? And I'm sure that many of you haven't been in spaces where that has been the case. So I want to encourage all of you to go back to your organizations, because each organization has one thing in common, and that's people, right? And so if we approach true transformation with a human lens and a DEI framework, we're going to get that diversity bonus. We're going to get the benefit of building ideas and creating new content that is going to help everybody increase their environment and the reason why they want to be. So again, if you haven't already, please click the link to complete the form. I will be sure to drop another link if you can want to register for the following event. We would love to see you there. And again, go out there and be great. Because if not now, when? And if not you, who? All right. So thank you. Thank you again for coming here. Major shout out to Myron. Thank you so much for being here. I learned plenty. I'm sure the audience have as well. Evaluation link is having some difficulties. All right, let me try to copy this again. Share. Let's see if we can work this out. Copy. Can you try clicking the link again to see if that helps a little bit? Okay.